superintendent of schools had responsibility for all the districts outside Rockford. Rockford was a charter district, which meant only those inside the city limits were in the district. As it expanded, they chewed up all the little districts around them. But this was how much money they were distributing to each township from a fund that started out with selling one section of land in each township. And they put the money, and then they only spent what interest raised from it. And how much was it, Pat?
For Winnebago in 1880, it was Winnebago Township, $629.11 for 667 children under 21.
So they got a little less than $1 a year.
Yeah, per capita was 94 cents a year.
Otherwise, there were taxes in the district for it. But that was, originally, that was what built some of the schools in the first place, because that's where a lot of the money went. Okay, this is the future West Heights when it was Hart School, and it wasn't very big, you can see that. It was along there where they've added to the Catholic cemetery now, if you know what I mean, as it goes east. They owned from the corner of Faulkner Road, but eventually a man left them a whole farm property there. He was raised in the Catholic orphanage in Freeport, and he left them his estate. And that's where the newer section on the east side of the cemetery is now. This is the old Nicholson or Coolidge School. It was very hard to come up with a picture of it because it had been gone so long. And this is what stands there now. If you remember the dinner dell, Carl Burks had a restaurant in there. And before that, the Myers family owned it, and they had a gas station there, and they also sold lunches. So people going by would pick up a lunch so they didn't have to wonder where they'd find one. This is the second school in the village, and that was where the new gym is on Simon School. It was to the corner there. Let's talk a little more about that one before we go on. They were basically 3 grade rooms, and they ran even a high school in this building. It started in 1868 with the first graduating class from Winnebago in 1872. And we do have lists of all the people that graduated, because for the 150th we gathered all that information and we have lists. And we invited everyone to the banquet we had that year, 2004. They even had lab classes and things, and they stuck them in places like the basement. And this is a privy. It didn't have any plumbing, so between that building and the church lot, they had that. There were people in 2004 who remembered that. Dorothy Cash had gone to grade school here, and then she went as a freshman to the new building and finished in 29. So there were some people still living then, but I don't think there are anymore. If we have pictures of people in front of it like this, it's almost impossible to identify anyone because there's nobody that can tell us who they are anymore. Tom Taylor's mother had a picture that was to the side of that school where the future building was built, and it faced toward the corner house where Mrs. Stahl lives now. And that class I could identify because there was only one boy in the class. And so we looked on all the lists and we said, that must be that one. Okay, let's go on. This is the Faulkner School. And as you can see, it looks to me like it was some kind of stone or some kind of thing like that. That was still going when I was here. I came when I was in 3rd grade. And you remember Coach Michael? Yeah. One year, he and his wife had a mobile home sitting where those apartments are now, where the classrooms were, over the athletic field. And she taught Faulkner School in those years. Some of the other buildings were used by different teachers. Glenn Oder and his family lived in the West Heights building after it wasn't being used otherwise. Okay, this is Maple Corners, and you can see all the trees were maples. There's a house there now, and sometimes that's a real nice use of some of these. The Faulkner School was taken down, and there's a nice ranch house that sits in the property with the trees and everything. I think it was the Calgaros that lived there for many years. This is Weldon School when it wasn't in very good shape. And the county superintendent used these pictures to say, you guys have to get busy and build a better school than that. And this is what they built. The porch here is modern, but the rest of it was put in. And Weldon School lasted longer than most of the other country schools because they consolidated with Centerville. And Centerville had some of the classes, and they had classes in this one. So that, you know, they weren't trying to cram a lot of kids in the same spot. By the way, do you know what school in this county had the most kids in an original district? It was Lincoln Park. Lincoln Park got so large, and they had the interurban going by too, so kids could ride it back and forth. But they built 2 more schools in their district, Stiles and the one that's used on William Dennis, exactly, yes. They're still using that, Rockford is. Okay, this is White School. That's on Osborne Road, about halfway down from Edwardsville to Montague. And here's the picture of the way it looks now. You see all those trees, it's still behind there. And Ron and Renee live in that building. So. And this is the Westfield, the original building. And that's the building they built after it burned. There was a year when everything was crowded that they bused kids down to Westfield, and they had one class in the Grange Hall and one class in this building, 5th and 6th. They all went there. And after that, they built the apartment buildings up here for classrooms. That was, Straley's did that, yes. And so then they had enough room again. And then they built the new high school eventually. Okay, this one we need to, this is the most famous move in Winnebago County, was that in 1903, they put 3 country districts together in the Seward area because the railroad had just gone through, and it made sense to have a town school instead of little ones scattered around the countryside. And so they built this building, and do you know what international fair happened in 1904? It was St. Louis, because they were celebrating from the Louisiana Purchase. But they made a model of this building and took it to the fair, and they received a prize because consolidation was the coming thing. Do you know what the second consolidated district in our county was? Harlem. Because Harlem had a whole row of little schools up and down North 2nd Street today, and the interurban went up there too. So they said if we consolidate all these together into one district, they could all ride the interurban to school. And so that's what they did up there. This is the building that still exists in Seward. It's not a school anymore, but the wooden building was taken down, and in 1930 they had built the gym section that had dressing rooms and the kitchen, I think. And so that was the part that they preserved, and they built these classrooms along the front. And they had a regular 6th grades of grade school for a long time. Then after a while, it was only preschool there. And then they said they wouldn't do it anymore. And so present day, it's the Park District in Seward that owns the building. And they have some things rented out all the time, and special events meet there too. So, okay, let's stop for a minute and ask you whether any of you went to a one-room original school. And let's start over here and go to different ones, okay?
Jerry Langley, originally from Duran, so I started out in a suite school up there in about, I was 42, 43, and that consolidated into Duran. And in 46, we moved down to Cunningham and Whitington there at Sheldon School. And then they consolidated and then went to Seward after that.
Who else was over here?
Oh, thank you. I'm Jack Crandall, and I went to Pell School over in the north part of Burritt for my full 8 years, most of which I was the only one in the class. So the school was pretty big, but, so to speak, but the population was kind of small attending. And of course, that's now a home.
Did you go to Rockford after that?
Oh, yes. Went to Rockford to high school and grade my middle school, or junior high.
I went to Oak Grove School for 7 years. That's over on Prairie Road, just north of South Main. And the thing I remember the most was that there was an unruly student that the teacher took in the back room with a stick like John had. And she came out smiling and he was crying. They took care of everybody. They didn't want him to go back in that back room.
Wasn't you?
No, it wasn't.
Sue.
Well, I went to a one-room school in Missouri. And when I was 5 years old, my mother thought I needed to have something to do. So she asked the school teacher if I could go to school. It had to be 6. I was 5. So the teacher said she can come. There was 2 other students in first grade. And I went, but she couldn't pass me because I wasn't old enough.
So you got double duty.
So we moved to Illinois, and I went to first grade in Illinois, and then we went back to Missouri, and my mother made a 3 out of the 2. So I went right into the 3rd grade. And yes, that too.
I'm Jan Seiler. Excuse me. I went to Sheldon School first through 4th grade, and then I went to Centerville through 8th. Then Monday.
They had an article in one of the first Winnebago weeklies that said how much they were going to miss the Newman family because that was half the school when they moved. And you guys told me you drove the stock from
Yeah,
west here all the way to Centerville on the roads.
that's what they say.
Yeah.
I'm Ava Slim. I went to country school in Iowa, and in our school there was about 17, and 10 of us were cousins. And I started in kindergarten, but I got to take kindergarten and first grade the same year. That wasn't because I was smart, I'm sure, but anyway, so along the way. When I used to work at the middle school, when they had Illinois history, the teachers would send them out to the library because they knew I went to a country school. And the kids were so amazed that kindergarten through 8th grade all played softball together. They didn't know how that many kids in that different age, how they did it. But that was the biggest amazement, not how school was, but that they played together.
Keep it closer.
My name's Bob Spellman. I'm not from this district, but
No.
the one-room school that I went to was not far from here. It was just inside Stevenson County. If for those of you who take Cedarville Blacktop west through Stevenson County, the county line is Gakey Road. 2 miles further west is Corwell Bridge Road. And at that corner, the southwest corner, was Centennial School. I went there 1st through 3rd grade. There were 6 grades when I was there. And I learned this much, much later. There was no indoor plumbing, there was no water in the building. And so the older kids, older boys, every morning went out to the well, the pump, and pumped water and brought it in and dumped it into a large barrel, really, that had a drinking fountain off the bottom, gravity fed. But it did have boys and girls bathrooms inside the building. They were outhouses, but they were inside the building. There was no flushing. And I remember there was a bag of lime by the door. And the teacher would put lime in the toilets to keep the smell down. So I don't ever remember it being a problem.
We went on a visit in Vermont to where Calvin Coolidge's father lived. And their house was like that. You went down a little hallway and into the privy within the house.
This building stood until about 15 years ago. My cousin Ron Spellman owns the property. And there was a couple that, there's now a nice ranch home on that corner, but he donated the building to the, I think, the Davis Fire Department, and they practiced burning it down. Sadly, wish somehow we could have saved it, but we couldn't.
Thank you.
Well, my name is Margaret Jones, and I went to one school all 8 years. Actually, it was in Ogle County. It was right on the corner of what is now Montague and Conger Road. And yes, we would go across the road to get a pail of water. And we had a furnace right in the room. But I graduated and seemed to do okay after that.
That was one of the more exceptional schools because it was half and half. It stood on Montague, and half of it was in Ogle County and half. Then that's the reason the Winnebago district has a little bit toward German Valley, because that was the youth school was split like that, and it all came into Winnebago's district later.
Well, I'm Lee Jones, and I went to school in Iowa. The first year, there was only 5 students, and they needed 6 in order to keep the school open. Otherwise, the school would be closed. And I was 5 years old, and they came to my parents and they asked if I could go to school at 5 years of age. And they agreed, and the teacher said that I had to take a nap. And guess where I slept? On the teacher's lap. So, I graduated.
My name's Bob Weldon. I went to one-room school in McHenry County. That building was built in 1840. It served all the purposes of the community. It was a town hall, and the council people there met. And the funeral parlor, I think there's a cemetery right outside our back door. And the last year was 1942, which was my 2nd grade, so I claimed 1 year in one-room school. 16 in the building, but just one room. 4 in my class. My brother was the only one in his class. I recall that we had a potbelly stove to keep us warm. I'm not sure we had a bathroom. I can't remember. I had a good bladder, I guess. I went back years later to go to the school, and the 3rd owner had been converted to a home. The 3rd owner asked me if I knew where the roof line was in the original building, because the school got encapsulated by all the building that was around it, and he couldn't figure out where the walls were and the lines of it. How would I know? I was in 2nd grade. I don't know. And excuse me, but I had one other point. So important. I still go to grade school reunions with my classmates.
Yeah.
And since they moved around the United States, we held them in about 5 or 6 different states. We just go where somebody's living and holding reunions.
Thank you.
I'm Marion Pedrick, and I went to Sheldon School with Jerry Langley. I went 1st and 2nd grade, and then we went to Surd School till 8th grade, didn't we? And then we came over to Winnebago High School. I remember we always played together outside, all grades, so we used to play Andy over. We'd stand on one side of the school and throw something over to the kids on the other side.
I went to a one-room schoolhouse in Sauk County, Wisconsin. And the unusual thing is that in 1962, they consolidated all the one-room schoolhouses in Wisconsin. So 1st and 2nd grade, one-room schoolhouse, 61, 62, outhouses, no indoor plumbing. That particular school put in indoor plumbing in 1962, and then the next year they consolidated into the communities. Rock Springs in Sauk County was where we then transferred to, population 400. So it kind of happened all at the same time. A lot of those schools in Wisconsin have been converted to either town halls or to homes, and many of them are standing, including the one that I went to.
I went all 8 grades
years to one-room school, actually, two different schools. First school I went to was over by Baileyville, and that's in Stevenson County. That was Cranes Grove School. If any of you know Baileyville, there's an area, a wooded area, that was Cranes Grove. Our teacher was Mrs. Borchers. She had a son my age, and it was interesting to me to find out recently that she lived to be 107 years old. She outlived 4 husbands. So I guess we can say those old grade school teachers were pretty tough. It's interesting to note that in those one-room schools, and I think this was pretty universal, that the teacher taught many different subjects. We were taught how to read and write music. Had a piano in the school. Of course, there were all 8 grades, and the older kids would help the younger kids. I remember, I think 1 or 2 years, there was only, I think someone else mentioned this, like 6 kids in the school. There weren't, but there was one family who had 3 kids there at the same time. And then we moved to over by Forreston, and so that was in Ogle County. Miss Timmer was the teacher there. She drove a little old Ford coupe, typical, stereotypical spinster lady. But again, I feel a good education, a well-rounded education. Our 8th grade graduation was all of the county schools together going down to Oregon, to the county courthouse maybe, or I don't know where.
Well, the superintendent oversaw it.
Yeah. So I don't regret those experiences at all. I think that was an interesting time. And when I was over at Cranes Grove, that was World War II time. We would go out and gather up milkweed pods. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember that. And you collected all your tin cans and everything for recycling. Whole different way of thinking than that. Anybody else?
You know what the milkweed pods were used for?
They told us they were used for the parachute silks.
They were used for the floating for Navy.
For the insulation, for the
ships.
Yeah, okay. That makes
If
sense.
the ship got shot.
Okay.
That's what we.
I can't say that I escaped a one-room school, but I was born on Tate Road in Owen Township. And up the road there was Hawley School. But at the time I was 5, my dad sold that and we went up to Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin. And there I got to go to kindergarten. And in that grade school up there, Wisconsin had a tradition of kindergartens. And it was in a special section of the building. And it had its own playground just for kindergarten kids. So it was the opposite of mixing them into all the other ages. We went up there this last year, and the town has grown like mad, but the same grade school has been added to, but the kindergarten arrangement is the same as it was when I was there all those years ago. I think, why don't we have a little break, and if you'd like to get a refreshment or something, then we'll talk about consolidation as soon as we're back together.